What is going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 36. I am your host, Marcus, and in this episode, we are talking about humble pie. Yes, a very creative title, but nonetheless, we've all been served a little bit of humble pie in our lives. And most of you know my story. For those people who follow me, you know my story, right? I've overcome a lot of adversity, right? I think we all live lives where we have our own flavor of adversity. And depending what it is, a lot of times we think someone has had a good life, but they have overcome difficulties in their lives through different means. And understanding that there is something in your life that humbles you so much that it changes your perspective on life. And today, this is what I want to talk about. This is something, I was thinking about of a different topic for today's discussion, and understanding that, I was going to talk about who we are. And when I start thinking about the idea, it's something I've talked about before, like who we are essentially the conscious side, the awareness of what is going on, and that is who we are, where we just observe what's going on. And I talk about approaching things in life in that same way, where you're not positive or really negative about things, but just observing things the way they are. And I've also talked about, trying not to deplete energy that you don't need to be, right? By trying to come at things and not be judgmental, because a lot of times if we start becoming more judgmental, right, we're expending energy that we don't need to expend. And so when talking about being humble, talking about who we are, there are events in our lives that happen where we come from a place, from a system, essentially, where you go out and you try to make yourself successful. And a lot of us define success as having a house, having a family, having that car, having these things, right? Once we have these things, we are quote unquote successful. But does that really define who we are? Have we gotten to the point that that's what defines who we are? Because every time we introduce ourselves, every time we talk to other people want to know what we do. People want to know where we're at. And depending what you tell them, they can already essentially categorize the kind of person you are. And even though we try not to do that, it is automatic. We try to get a sense of where someone is coming from. But when going back to the idea, the thought of who we are and having a piece of that humble pie, we realize that the material things don't matter. We realize that it gets stripped away a good majority of the time. Some event in your life, it could be stripped away. Maybe you start a business and it is all gone. Maybe you put it all at risk and it all goes away. Or maybe you have a divorce and it all goes away. Or maybe you had it all, but you were living paycheck to paycheck, and then you lost that job and you couldn't find a job for a very long time. And so you get a piece of humble pie and you really find out who you are. But not just who you are, who your true friends are. You truly find out how people see you. And in those dark moments, because we have dark moments, life isn't always about, unicorns and rainbows. That's just not the way life works. You have to have ups and you have to have downs. Because if everything was just so marvelous every single time, you wouldn't appreciate the goods. And realize that the bads, they teach us, the bad things in our lives, they teach us essentially that humility that we need in our lives. And realize that it's not about chasing the materialistic things. It's more about living a life where you're happy. But what does that take? What is that point that you are satisfied? And this is something I've reflected on many different times about, well, can I get to a point where I'm really satisfied? And so I had to redefine, well, what am I defining of who I am? How do I want people to know me when I pass from this life? That's ultimately what you want to focus on. Do I want to be known as that person that just worked all the time? No, I don't. They want to know that person that reached out and tried to help people change their lives. Yes. I want to at least know that I have touched or changed somebody's life. I don't need to affect the masses, but I would like to change somebody's life. A piece of information. I know at a young age, I've talked about a friend of mine that I helped him get through a very rough time in his life. And that was really where the thought and the idea of helping others and seeing the impact of what you can make by using words. And a lot of times, even coming into like the self-help and everything, I was very cautious, and I thought it was essentially a lot of woo-woo stuff, which is what a lot of people think self-help is. But what it is understanding that you're coming from a different conscious level depending on where you are in your life. And sometimes you have a piece of humble pie that puts you at a different conscious level. Then it starts to make you question the way things are in life. It gets you to make you understand what is important. Who am I truly am? Am I really chasing material things to define who I am, to prove to others that's who I am? Or am I trying to define who I am through my actions? And I've always talked about, people can tell you what you want to hear, right? You do this all the time through life. With their personal relationships, through professional relationships, people will tell you what you want to hear. But it is in their actions and what they do that tells the truth. And so I have tried to make it my attempt through my actions to define essentially who I am. Right? And that's not trying to put any kind of filter on who I am. Have I done bad things in my life? Yes. Have I done good things in my life? Yes. The thing is we are not perfect. We are human. We make mistakes, and we tend to forget that. So when you're defining who you are, and you're talking about getting to a point in your life where you get humbled, you have to realize that it's what you need sometimes to understand who you really are and realize that you don't need those material things. And I've talked about this. I've talked about having everything stripped away. Right after my divorce, right, I've had everything taken away, and I just didn't want it. I didn't want any piece of it. Those were memories in my mind. It's not something I wanted. I wanted to start over. And when I did, I felt in my mind a very sense of being home, of being, again, humbled to realize that I didn't need all those things. And even though I had those things, I've achieved a lot of those things again, but understanding that when I had those things and they were stripped away, right, they didn't make me happy. A lot of times you feel like you're portraying somebody you're not. And so this goes back to defining who you are, and that you need that piece of humble pie to do that, to put you back in check. And I think life will keep serving it up to you until you get it right. And even though I've started over and I'm doing other things, I'm changing stuff very dramatically. And a lot of people won't agree with that. A lot of people will think there's something wrong with my thought process. But when I talk about it, what I'm ultimately mean is that, I start following intuition a lot more. And to be able to do that, you have to, this is why I talk about meditation. This is why I talk about breathing. And it's following that guidance, the internal guidance. And this is really the awareness of who you are. And even for myself, I lose that every now and again, right? Like I said, it's something you have to maintain. And sometimes I do fall off. We all fall off. It's correcting and being aware of the mistakes that we're making and putting it back to where it should be at, and not just letting it fall off. Yes, you can get tired. Yes, don't over try to teach yourself something. And this is something else I've been going over the past week too, is just understanding, I've always thought it's very important to teach yourself, to be obsessed with the one you find where you're going in your destination. You become obsessive about what it is. Right? Every moment should be obsessed to whatever that goal is. If you don't know what that is, if you don't know what your purpose is, right, you have to spend some time to define it. Then once you get it, then you execute. Then once you master it, you move on to something else, but still have that, right? Because I think it's important to understand that you have to have a single focus and master and move on. For me, when I was in that humble state, right, where you feel like you're naked and bare and there's nothing there, you live moment to moment. You don't think about the past. You don't think about the future. You just live in the moment, because it's too hard to think about it. The past is too painful, and the unknowing about the future is painful. And so you find belief, you find hope in who you are. And for me, maybe it was easier for me because, I've talked about being in the military, and people talk about this, about how, you're broken down in the military. Even before the military, I was a very disciplined person. Maybe that was just my upbringing, but I was always very disciplined in what I did. And knowing that, when I went in there, it wasn't as bad. But being said, I showed myself that it was possible. I showed myself that I could support myself. And I think a lot of times that is what scares us, is we are scared of being alone. We're scared that we can't handle things by ourselves, that we need somebody there. Yes, it's important to have people that care about you, people that can guide you, people that can mentor you, people that can do things, right? That is important. I'm not saying it's not, but the core piece of it is to know that you can rely on yourself. And when you get that piece of humble pie, right, this is what it leads to, is to understand that you can rely on yourself, that it's okay. You're strong enough to pick yourself up. You're strong enough to start over. You don't need all the material things. And I think when things like divorce or things like losing a job or something like that happens, you start looking at things very differently, right? You start looking at all the things you lose. And typically it's material things, right? Like, I can't watch Netflix anymore. I got to cancel Netflix. Or I can't have this nice house. I got to sell this nice house. Or I can't have that nice car. I got to get rid of the nice car. And so it comes down to those things. And then subconsciously, we let those things define who we are. You're not living the life, following the intuition, and living the life that you want to live. And then realizing, well, at what point do I become satisfied? Because a lot of times, even for myself, I was like, well, at what point will I become satisfied? Well, at what point will I define my satisfaction or who I am? And for me, it's getting to a place where I felt like I've helped people out. I felt like I've achieved something greater, right? This goes into the whole thing about, you can have something good, but to be great, you got to risk some things to be great. And that's what I'm doing, is I've had good things in my life. I'm not saying I haven't. I've struggled to get those good things, right? I've had to battle to get good things. I've had to make choices. I had to make sacrifices to get the good. But to be great, you have to sacrifice even more sometimes. And for me, I want to get to a point to where I can 110% rely on myself through entrepreneurship, through whatever it is. And I don't need somebody else to be able to do that. And I'm defining myself, even though it's not easy. And even though on this journey, or whatever the case is, what I'm saying is that, it's not just me, right? Yes, I have to have a core belief in myself. That's what I'm talking about. But I can find people that can help. I can find coaches. I can find mentors. I can find groups, like-minded people, be around those people, talk about ideas and topics and theories, whatever the case is, to get me closer to where I want to go. I think a lot of times we need to reset and remember that. And I talk about this, especially especially if you're in a particular situation. And I relate this a lot to divorce, relationships, because we get so tied in a relationship and you find that you forget who you are because you don't provide yourself your independence anymore. It's like you give up your independence. And I think that's one of the worst things you can do in any relationship, right? Personal or professional. You can't rely on the other person. The other person's, again, should complement you. And you should live your own life, and you should enjoy life. Yes, talk about each other's lives and do stuff like that. I'm not saying you can't do that, but you have to have your own life. Because if you don't, you forget who you are. And when you lose yourself, right, you start becoming miserable. You start looking and nitpicking and all these other different things in your life because you forget who you are, and you'll blame the other person for that. You feel like you've lost yourself. And this is why I'm doing this episode, to talk about humility and putting yourself back in and understanding how you're going to define who you are. And again, if you don't know that, you find purpose through experiences, through going out and doing different things. And this is something, I talk about this and preach about this a lot, and something I've even noticed I'm being more conscious and aware of, that I haven't gone out as much as I used to go out. Yes, I've been going out and doing trails and going out and trail runs and trying different things, right? But there's ultimately understanding that, I still want to go rock climbing. I still want to go out, and I still want to go canoeing, and I still want to get closer to nature, right? Start fishing again, start doing a lot of different things that I did with my father, right? I think I'm coming at that age where, I'm relating back to myself as a kid. And I think when you get older, you get to that point to where, well, when I was a kid, that's the way I grew up, right? I was in nature. My father always had me out in nature doing something, whether we were hunting or whether we were fishing or whether we were always about being out in nature and enjoying it. And so I've gravitated more back towards that. Not saying I didn't do it previously, but I'm doing more of that lately. And so there are different things, like I want to go out and start, doing boxing or something like that. Boxing is something I've always wanted to do. And the thing is I worry too about, different people talk about boxing, the head trauma and everything like that. And so there's certain things that, like, you have to, like, just stop the overthinking. And this is what goes back to the whole intuition. Just if it feels right, if it feels like it's something you want to do, if you naturally gravitate towards it, if you can hone in on that intuition and gravitate towards it, just do it. See if you like it. Maybe you do it and you don't like it. Or maybe you do it and you find out it's the greatest thing ever. And so I've done a lot of that. But again, there are times when you have to keep yourself in check and realize, okay, well, I talked about constricting your comfort zone, and I'm starting to fall back in that constricting my comfort zone. And so you have to realize you're doing this and then start pushing again. And ask yourself that question: when's the last time I did something that scared me? And then go do something that scares you, because that's important. And even for myself, when I first started Discover Ignite, when I first started going live and all that, those things scared me. But now it's become such a normal thing that it's like my comfort zone is so established, mostly in that it's just, to me, it's just looking at a camera. I know there's tons of eyeballs that can see this video or hear my podcast and ultimately understand that for me, that doesn't bother me anymore, because I'm not worried about someone else's opinion. People may not like what comes out of my mouth. People may agree what comes out of my mouth. People may think I'm crazy. People may think that the words that I say are extremely valuable. And I appreciate those people that think all of it. Because yes, you are right. It is my opinion. It is my experience. Just like you have your opinion, you have your experience. Maybe we can relate in some fashion, maybe we don't. And that's perfectly okay. But when we are trying to define who we are, we really need to look at what our lives and what is really guiding our lives, because the things that guide our lives are a lot of thoughts and ideas of some of other people and not ourselves. And what I've always talked about, one of my first, I think it was my second episode of the podcast, was about the art of thought, because it's so important. And I highly advise that you go back to that episode, because it's so important to think for yourself. And how important it is to sit and think about these things. And I talk about sitting in silence, and a lot of people that drive you nuts. But sometimes you really just need that. Sometimes you really need to understand where you're at in life, what you're doing, and how you want to go about it. And just not putting up with the stuff that no longer suits you, right? Relationships, jobs, old habits, right? Old habits are hard to shake. Maybe that's something you just don't want to do anymore. Maybe you're tired of just waking up and feeling like junk and you want to be healthy. Maybe you're tired of coming home and just jumping on Netflix and not going out and being in groups. Or maybe you're tired of working at that job and you just want to start writing books. Or maybe you're tired of whatever the case is, right? Ultimately, understand you have the power to do that. You are who you are in the moment. I've talked about this, about how you are currently writing your life. And it can change at the drop of a hat. You could quit your job tomorrow. It may be scary, and I'm not saying you should do it, right? You should have some kind of plan, but you could quit your job tomorrow, and then who knows what would be next. You can define where it goes from that point. Uncertainty is scary. Change is scary, but it is possible. When you are defining yourself, you shouldn't put restrictions on yourself. And I know that's hard, but it's natural. It's the way we think. It's easy for us to define, so that way we can know who we're dealing with. We can know who we are, or who we think we are. And so that lesson of humility and having that humble pie is needed, is necessary. I think for me, I probably had a couple doses, one too many at one point, to get me to understand that the actions I was taking were not aligning with where I wanted to go. And sometimes, when even following intuition, you don't really know where you're going, right? The internal compass knows, but you're only allowed to go next step. And it's actually quite interesting, because there's two different avenues of this. And I talk about having a destination in mind, right? Like, I think there's certain things like you really want to do, and you should follow those things. But then you have that intuition that guides other things in your life that you should listen to and you should take action on. Because that is your internal compass that is telling you where you need to go. And a lot of times we try to fight it for whatever the reason. Logically, it just doesn't make sense. Logically, you don't know how you're going to figure it out. But you don't need to. If you listen to it, it will guide you. It will give you next steps. It will get you to where you want to go, where it is trying to tell you to go. And that is the nice part about it. And, the more I've been doing this, the more I find that there is no reason for concern. There's no reason to not follow your guts. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Logically, we don't know who we are. We think we need to know who we are to define ourselves to other people, to define ourselves to ourselves. But you don't need that. You are fine. You can do whatever it is that you want to do. It's just knowing what sacrifices you have to make, being okay with that, because everything comes at a cost. All things come at a cost. To say that it doesn't come at a cost, I would be lying to you. Everything has a consequence. Like I was just saying, you can quit your job. That's going to leave you with, how am I going to pay for the roof over my head and the food in my mouth? Find a cheaper place to live. Do you really need a big house? Do you really need that brand new car? Do you really need X, Y, and Z? Fill in the blank. Do you really need those things? No, for me, I could be happy on a little shack on the beach, and I would be perfectly happy. With the internet connection, of course, because I like to do stocks. But that's all I need. I wouldn't need anything more than that, right? When I start defining, okay, well, where would I be satisfied? I would be there, right? As long as my kids were good, as long as I had that, and I didn't have to worry about it, I would be perfectly fine, right? Because I know that the moments in life are what matter. The moments in life are what is going to make me happy. Creating moments. If you can't create moments, then life is really not living. This goes back to how I have talked about, how I've been kind of slacking on doing things that make me feel scared. Because I've adjusted to the camera, I've adjusted to doing videos, I've done a lot of different things that I was initially scared about, and I started doing them. But now I'm at the point where, okay, well, when's the last time I did something that scared me? What is the next thing that I need to do that's going to scare me or put me out there a little bit more, that's going to allow me to make bigger changes in life? Or what kind of changes do I want? Right? Because I still have a destination specific things, right? Like I still want to focus and be obsessed with what I'm doing with my stock market stuff and all stuff like that, because I do very much enjoy that. I do very much love talking about that stuff. It's something, again, I've never really would even consider doing 10 years ago. And then all it took was my curiosity that led me to it, that caused me down this whole rabbit hole that has really kind of just changed my whole life. And I like it. And so it's just finding different things and finding and setting priorities that's going to help you get there. Because you do have to have a destination in mind. You do have to define that. You do have to see that clearly to be able to get there. And a lot of times we just overthink about everything, blow it out of proportion, and lead back to the same old song and dance that we don't enjoy. Defining ourselves, our titles, through the work that we do, the things that we've achieved in our life, as opposed to just living our lives, enjoying the moments, talking about good times, bad times, because they do happen, right? We don't just all live good times. I'm not just saying everything on here is good times. Right? I talk about a lot of bad times on here. I talk about good times. I talk about the things that humble you and what it takes to get you to where you want to go. So be humbled. Live a life through intuition, through your guts. You get bad hunches through intuition. You get good hunches, undefined hunches. Like, I should really be doing something with this, but I'm not. What can I do with this feeling? And it takes you honing that skill. It takes you focusing on that skill. We've all been in a situation where that intuition kicks in. Like, yeah, there's something really off here that I shouldn't be doing, or I should be aware of. And then you have that other intuition that's like, okay, this feels right. Whatever it is, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense, but whatever it is, it feels right. And this is where I need to be. And that's how you define yourself, because you are living in the moment.